if you wish, and that others can as well. Thank you so much. Okay, great. So we're just going to do a debrief, a little bit of a look back as we look forward to what we're going to be doing today together. And so we are here because there was a recognized need about growing resilience in our community. This is kind of the framing question. And across systems to make Guilford County a safe, secure, and nurturing place for all. And so that's the question that basically we've been answering since September, since we have gotten together to think about what's needed in terms of a community effort about resiliency building. If we could flip to the next slide. So this is just a grounding slide. About where we've been. This is our collective work. And so far we've had a few hundred people participate in this vision casting for what this network could be and how we can work together to build resilience. So in September and October, we really looked at what does it mean to be resilient and what are the characteristics of a resilient community? What would a resilient Guilford County look like? You'll remember some brainstorming that we did and some small group breakouts. And how should we define it? Really taking a look at getting deep together about what does it really mean? We continued that work in October. And into this November meeting as well, as we started talking about values. One of the most important things that we heard about from Carey Sipp last time we were together was that we all need to know how we're going to work together. If we are working, especially across organizations, many of us work in organizations that have organizational values, but what does it look like when we're all coming together to work toward something, and how do we want to work together, and what values will guide us in that work? In November and December, we're going to look at what teams and structures are needed to build a resilient Guilford County that's aligned with those collective values. And then what is the work of the teams? So how will we break into potentially smaller groups to advance the work together? And then December and January will really be spent recruiting folks to join the effort and action teams. So putting some structure to all of this. If we could flip to the next slide. Thanks, Leland. So this is the working definition. Last time we were together, we had 4 definitions that we were looking at. And we did some polling and we did some actually wordsmithing. And this is the definition that we landed on as a group. And so we're talking about a dynamic process at a community and systems level where communities respond and adapt to stresses and to challenges. And then it goes a little bit deeper into the community response. So as a community, we promote safe, secure, nurturing environments for all. And this draws on interconnected social networks and coordinated, easy to access and comprehensive resources that will help our communities thrive. These are themes that we have heard since September around safety and nurturing environments, and then the interconnectedness. As we've heard over and over again, Guilford County is resource rich, and sometimes we don't know where to turn next and how to connect with each other about how to make sure that we're delivering the best outcomes for the people we work with. And so making sure that we have comprehensive resources that are easy to access for people to use who need them at the point in time when they do need them. If we could flip to the next slide. So when we think about the Resilient Guilford defined, so basically it was taking that definition and moving this down into what are we doing as part of the network. So the Resilient Guilford network will work at the community and systems level to ensure communities within Guilford County can respond to and adapt to the stresses and challenges. And so this is really taking that bigger, broader definition and grounding it in our own location for some place-based work here in Guilford County. If we can flip to the next slide. We got together last time we heard from Carey Sipp again about values, and she shared some examples from other community resiliency building efforts that had worked together on defining values. And so In the meeting notes from the last meeting, you saw some proposed values that came out of all of the listening sessions that we've done so far with you, and then other listening sessions in the community as well. So these are the PACE's connection values. And this is organizationally, and we just wanted to lift this up as the example, just to ground us in what values look like. We could flip to the next slide, please. Okay, so based on the work so far, these are the draft values for the Resilient Guilford network that we have talked about in small groups, that were lifted up during the breakout sessions and the report out sessions. So I'll just run through these really quickly, and then we're going to do a deeper dive into value statements. So 1 was trust, transparency, and accountability. 2nd was equity and inclusion with diverse representation. 3 is family voice centered and client led. We heard a lot about that, about making sure that families are centered in all of the work. And that had to do a lot with respect as well for the individual. Data driven while applying a trauma informed lens. So both holding the data, kind of the quantitative, and then making sure that we are attending to people as the human beings that they are and that we all are. A bias towards action. And we'll see, Lisa will go, one of my colleagues will kind of run through what that value statement talks about. One of the things that sticks in my head is, less talk, more action. And we'll go into that more deeply. Collaborative was the 6th one. Relationship and strengths focused, as opposed to looking at shortcomings. And then joy and celebration, which we've lifted up as being really important when we're working together. If we could flip to the next slide. So just going back to that PACE's connection example, every single one of the values has a further statement to further define what we mean. And that's the work that we're going to be doing today, is that refinement. And everyone here is going to have the opportunity to weigh in on a couple of the values so that we can continue to get a better understanding of what they mean and how that will drive our work here in Guilford County with the Resilient Guilford Network and the Trauma Provider Network. If we could flip to the next one. So we're going to go through the value statements that are connected to each of the values. And I would just encourage everybody, we're going to break out into groups. So pay attention to these. You're going to choose one of 4 groups to participate in. I'm going to, and then if you have questions about these value statements now, or if something really resonates with you, you can put that in the chat as well. And we will take note of that before we break out into the groups. So I'm going to turn it over to Mel so that she can run through this. We're reading them and having them on screen because some of us process information very differently. And then also to just make sure that folks on the phone have access to them. So Mel, turning it to you.
All right. Thank you, Mary. Good afternoon and welcome, everyone. Just going to read through the first 4 value statements. Value 1, trust, transparency, and accountability. Change happens at the speed of trust. Trust is built over time through courageous conversations, honest, on-the-spot feedback, clarity about how decisions are made and by whom, and consistent communication. Partners also need to act with integrity and be responsible for and hold each other responsible for action and inaction while working together, always with the goal of learning and growing. Value number 2, equity and inclusion with diverse representation. The work of building community resilience is not possible without examining and thwarting structural racism while undoing damage of the past and the present. This includes ensuring that reparative structures are in place and that everyone has equitable access to care and to resources. Future work needs to center the strengths, desires, and dreams of Black, Indigenous, and people of color, individuals, neighborhoods, and communities. Next slide, please. And again, as Mary mentioned, we're going to have these in our breakout rooms as well. Value 3, family voice-centered, client-led. Individuals and families are in the best position to identify, uncover, and address the root causes of systemic problems. Listening deeply to families and ensuring they are at the table to craft solutions is critical to building a resilient community. Value 4, data-driven while applying a trauma-informed lens. It's critical to work from the most recent data/evidence to understand one part of a story while also putting structures in place to prevent being extractive and punitive within already vulnerable populations. I'm going to hand it over to Lisa to go through the final 4 before we go to our breakout rooms.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you again for being with us. Value number 5, bias towards action. Less talk, more action, as one group shared. This includes taking calculated risks, learning from mistakes, sharing what is learned, and improving as a result. Value number 6, collaborative. Resilience. Building work requires partners across sectors to come together to meet common goals. This requires time, attention, vulnerability, and adaptability, with a focus on the root causes of system failures. Next slide, please. Value number 7, relationship and strengths focused. Building trust requires strong relationships, as well as a willingness to look at strengths instead of deficits in clients, partners, and decision makers. Value number 8, joy and celebration. Celebrate small wins and individual group accomplishments. Enjoy being together and what we're accomplishing together, and approach the work with equal parts humility and awe. Thank you so very much. Looking forward to the group. Mary?
Great. Thanks, Lisa and Mel. So I just also wanted to lift up, and I put this in the chat, that these words, actually, we went back and listened to the breakout sessions and looked at the notes and the conversations that we've been having and in the chats. And so we hope that you see your words reflected in these statements. And now's a time when we actually get to spend a little bit more time to refine them, to ask questions, and to spend a little bit more time just making sure that we understand and change as needed. So we're going to have 4 breakout groups. Each group is going to reflect on 2 value statements to improve them. And you get to choose which group you want to join based on your interests. So the breakout groups, will put those up in just a second, and Leland will explain what needs to happen next. Each group's going to have a note taker and a reporter. And then we're going to come back together to report out the group work so that we can further refine the statements about how we'll work together today and in the future. And so if we can move to the next slide. These are the groups, and you get to choose. So group 1 is going to work on values 1 and 2. Group 2, facilitated by Lisa, is focused on value 3 and value 4. And that's family voice-centered and client-led and data-driven while applying a trauma-informed lens. Group 3, facilitated by Rachel, value 5, bias toward action, and value 6 around collaboration. And group 4, last but never least, is Mel's group, focused on value 7, relationship and strengths focus, and value 8, joy and celebration. And I should say I'll be facilitating group number 1, around trust, transparency, and accountability, and then equity and inclusion with diverse representation. So Leland, do you want to give some instructions to folks about what we do next?
Sure. So here in just a second, you all are going to have the option to opt into which breakout room you would like. And so you will just click join when that shows up on your screen. If for some reason it does not show up on your screen, at your toolbar at the bottom, where you can mute and unmute, there's an area that says breakout rooms, and you can click on that alert and it will take you. Otherwise, feel free to stay here and I will send you to whichever room you choose. So here we go.
Okay, can everyone see the breakout rooms?
I don't.
Okay, I see some people disappearing.
Yep, it looks like about half the group has joined a breakout room. If you don't see the selection on your screen, you can let us know which one you prefer and we can shoot you to that room.
Okay, and Leland, could you send me to group 1, please?
Sending you there.
Leland, do you want me to send you to group 2? Wait, which one are you? Oh, you're not a group. Okay, never mind. Sorry.
Hey, Lon, this is Chap. Can you send me to group 1?
There you go, chap.
And Carrie, is there a group you'd like to go to?
Yes, I'd like to go to group 1.
All right, sending you there now. I see Rachel's comment in the chat box to also go to group 1, sending you there now. And Letitia, did you want to go into a particular group or just hang tight?
I would like to go to group 2.
Awesome. There you go. Have fun. All right, Leland, I think it's just me and you left. So I am gonna hang behind the scenes. How much time do we have here?
We gave them 20 minutes.
So 12:40. We'll come
Yep.
back.
I will stay in case there's any questions or issues.
Okay, I'm just gonna mute.
Yep. Welcome back, guys. Everybody should be joining us here in a minute or so. Just take a few deep breaths and stretch and take a break while we wait for other folks to come back.
All right, Leland, how's it looking with the breakout groups? They all coming back in?
Everybody should be coming back in.
Great.
Just a second. We should have everybody back.
Everyone's back. Fantastic. Welcome back, everybody. How were the groups? Can you give me a thumbs up, thumbs to the middle, thumbs down? How'd we do? Okay, fantastic. All right, I see Lisa put a celebratory hat and confetti up too. So that's exciting. And thank you to the groups for all the work that you did to think through these value statements. We're going to go ahead and do report outs. And so each group has about, I think, 4 minutes or so to report out what you all talked about in your group. So why don't we start? Should we start with the end in mind and go to group 4? I see Mel with a big reaction there. Okay, group 4, you're up.
Yes, I would love to start. I am the reporter. Unfortunately, no one in my team wanted to step up, and that is okay. I think we're all just trying to focus so much on these value statements. But we had some exciting conversation. We had value 7 and value 8. So looking at value 7, relationship and strengths focused. Building trust requires strong relationships as well as a willingness to look at strengths instead of deficits. So we talked as a group about possibly taking deficits out of that value statement, because some of us mentioned that when deficit is included in that definition, it kind of makes you focus on what those deficits are, where we're trying to focus on what the strengths are. So possibly taking the word deficit out and saying a willingness to focus on strengths. That was value 7. And then maybe also focusing on adding, instead of just focusing on interpersonal, adding as community relationships as well. I know we've got clients, partners, and decision makers, but broadening that a little wider to our community. So number 7, other than those, everything looks great. Agreement on that one. And of course, who doesn't love a little joy and celebration? So value number 8 is my favorite because, you know, I love some joy. And I shared that my cup is always half full. We talked as a group about how important it is to celebrate all of those small wins, no matter how tiny, and taking those baby steps and those celebrating all those small wins and accomplishments is so important, not only professionally with your clients, but also personally. So we thought that one kind of encompasses everything it needs to for value statement number 8. And that's it. Thank you. And thank you, group 4.
Big round of applause for group 4, a little whoop whoop. Very nicely done, y'all. Okay, wonderful. And one thing that I realized that I should have said is I wonder if we can bring the value statements up on screen, Leland, if we can go backwards to those so that everybody can see the full statement too as we're talking. Sorry, I should have asked for that before. So let's go back to group 3. And who is the reporter?
I was the reporter for group 3.
Awesome.
Group 3 had it going on, just going to say that. So we had values 5 and 6. So talking about bias toward action, some of the things that kind of stuck out that we sort of talked about was that if we promise to act on something or we have a plan, that we need to follow through on that plan. And if that plan changes, we need to have a reason for that and be able to sort of pivot and make some changes. We also talked about like action outside of the collaborative. So we can't just talk about it once a month and like call it good. We need to do like follow up and act on those things, participate outside of those collaborative meetings. And that other piece of accountability as well, to hold each other accountable to do what we say we're going to do. So with that, we thought maybe something could be added to that value about follow-up and accountability, something along those lines. And then with value 6, collaboration, we talked a lot about like building relationships. That seemed to be really important of, you know, when we build relationships with one another as professionals, it makes it a lot easier for referrals and for collaboration. And where possible, doing face-to-face meetups, having that social time where we can really have knowledge about what one another does and make it a lot more about people than about agencies. So several of us had some examples of that, but really trying to highlight that. It takes a little bit more work in COVID times, but definitely the value on building relationships. And then also, you know, knowing that someone else might be a better fit for our client than we are. And so, you know, being willing to take that step of saying, you know what, I think this other person might be, you know, might have what you need or might be a better fit. And so making that referral when necessary. Being willing to be adaptable. So that adaptability piece we talked about and the vulnerability piece as well. But being willing to say, you know, I don't have the answer, but let me see if this other person does. And if the plan doesn't work or, you know, we need to problem solve together. That is one of the benefits of collaboration is problem solving and helping each other out. If I left anything out, please group 3, shout it out.
Wow. Did somebody want to talk about group 3?
Oh no, I was just saying she got it.
Nailed it, huh? Fantastic. Thank you so much, Hannah. And well done, group 3. And thank you so much, Kelly, for putting the group members into the chat. That's a really big deal. Okay, let's do group 2. Are we turning it over to Charlene?
Yes, Charlene
Yes.
Bradley is going to report for group 2. Thanks, Charlene.
Okay, so for value 3, family voice centered client led, we thought that the definition that is listed here was sufficient. And we talked more about how we could implement that. How do we involve clients and give them a voice now? We talked about making sure we have settings that are accessible and available, training clients on getting to the root cause, such as the 5 whys, holding listening sessions and town halls, flipping the script with those town halls and listening sessions, so that the clients are the experts or panelists, if you will, and the audience would be the service providers. In terms of data-driven while applying a trauma-informed lens, we thought that the definition would maybe not resonate with clients and maybe hard to understand for clients or the people that we're trying to serve. So we came up with insurance agencies and systems are trained in trauma informed care using evidence-based strategies to prevent re-traumatization or victimization of those accessing services.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for offering that up, Group 2. Charlene, I hope that we have that captured in writing because we would really love to have that word for word what you just shared and said. So I hope that you'll share that with us after. Awesome work. Awesome work. Okay. All right, Group 1, you are up and we'll turn it over to Adrian Spinner.
Okay. We talked about both values in a really thorough way as far as value number 1, which is trust, transparency, accountability. Some of the feedback given as far as add-ons was to include active listening and to prioritize active listening to understand. Leaning into discomfort that comes with these conversations and difficult conversations. Especially when it comes to accountability, being willing to address personal bias because we all have them, especially when it comes to structural racism. Approach the work without thinking that you as an individual know everything, so bringing a humble spirit to the work. Be in a place to receive the feedback. The explanation really went into being willing to give feedback, but we want to make sure that we're willing to receive it as well. Take responsibility of your own, this can go with everything, your own accountability, your own discomfort, your own biases. Don't center yourself in some of the difficult conversations if you're part of a more privileged population. Do your own research and walk through your own discomfort or look to allies to do that and not always the marginalized community. And then compassion is the action of empathy, which I really love that phrase. So including that. Value number 2, equity, inclusion, diverse representation. A lot of what we talked about with value number 1 can apply to this. 2 things that really came up were being sure in the definition to name other marginalized populations, especially I think the LGBTQ+ community and communities that have English as a second language or do not speak English. Our immigrant communities, I think it's important to name those. And to center intersectionality in the folks that sit at the intersection of so many isms. And I think we talked about looping in the concept of racial and gender justice. And I think that that will kind of encompass structural sexism and racism. And then the take responsibility part that we talked about with value 1, that can definitely apply to number 2, especially when it comes to anti-racism work. Approach work in a culturally humble way. Look to other allies to walk you through the discomfort and the questions, and don't always look to BIPOC folks or impacted communities to walk you through your discomfort and your privilege. And then be courageous to lean into these conversations and difficult work. Really having diverse representation takes courage, and it takes courage to listen. We also appreciate the ambition of these statements and the action statements used in it. Undoing past damage and reparative structures is very important for a mentality that is not all talk, but action too.
Wow and wow. Great summary, Adrian, and excellent work from Group 1 on some on values 1 and 2. Thank you so much for sharing that. We have a few minutes left, so I'm wondering if folks have any reactions across the value statements as well. Anything that stood out to you that you would like to lift up to the group, you can put it in chat, or you can share it, take yourself off mute now. Just want to open up the lines to you to see anything that that you want to lift up at this moment. I love working with such smart people. You all are rock stars.
One comment that I'll add is, again, I'm wowed by the feedback and the ideas and the refinement of these values. And I think it's really good that we're spending the time on the front end talking about these values so that it sets up for success, and really just understanding how we work together and how the action teams, once they're defined, will work together. The goal, the thought for the, as we kind of move into the next phase for action teams, is instead of having, there was some question of whether action teams could be some of these values, like collaboration team or family voice, family and youth voices team, like those kinds of things. But I really like how these values are weaved, no matter what action teams get lifted up, that the community says we really need to forward this work, that these values, equity and family voice and trust, will run through all action teams, no matter which ones are lifted up. And so I really like that framing, and I just appreciate everyone's deep thought about refining these, because they're going to be critical as we move forward.
Absolutely. And just in terms of the refinement process, we're going to take what you all shared today and do some refinement. And I'd love to be able to work with a few of you from each of the groups to test things back, if that's okay with you. Would everybody be willing to do that, to take a look again? We had a couple volunteers from group 1 because it was really meaty about what needed to potentially change. Would folks be willing to do that? Okay. All right, we'll make sure that we get these back out to folks, because the process of refinement will continue. And as Kelly said, this is just a preview then. So we have some defined values, and then the action teams, we're going to spend some time working on that at the next time, our next time together. And that's a good time to turn it back over to Kelly to just share a little bit of information about some things that are hot off the press that we want to draw your attention to. So can we move to the next slide, Elon, please?
Sure, got you covered. So just wanted to give you a heads up that as of Monday, we just released a report called Resilient NC. North Carolina as a state is looking to how North Carolina continues to build momentum across the state on resiliency focused work. And so they commissioned us early in the year around thinking about what's the landscape for North Carolina, as well as what are other states doing across the country to build statewide infrastructures that support communities. And so we scanned North Carolina initiatives, and we also talked to over a dozen states to specifically understand from their leadership level, the top leaders that are rolling out statewide resiliency efforts, what they did, what worked, what didn't work, lessons learned, that kind of thing. So all of that is documented in this report. It is on our website. If somebody could, since I've got the screen up, if somebody could pop that, somebody from our Kellen team could pop that link into the box, that would be in the chat box, that would be helpful. But we're hoping we'll be disseminating this report for the next couple months, and we'll have a more detailed overview of the report. But just wanted to let you know that that report is available now if you wanted to look at any of those resources. The full document is over 100 pages. It's quite lengthy, but there's an executive summary and a one-pager that could be printed off too, that kind of hit the high notes if you wanted to see some of the high notes. But with the hope that we don't have to reinvent the wheel. Obviously, every community initiative is going to be different because every community is different. But there are some structural and ideas that maybe we could adopt into our efforts. So some ideas there if anybody would like to read through it. For our December meeting, be thinking about the values. As Mary said, we'll continue to refine those and test those back. what kinds of things are already happening in our community in Guilford, in Guilford County and across North Carolina that way we can maybe leverage? What kinds of things can we examine so we don't reinvent the wheel? And so be thinking about that kind of work as December meeting will be kind of finalizing the refinement of the values and thinking about what action teams we need to establish the work. In North Carolina, these are some of the action teams on this graphic on the right that are proposed. And so these are the action teams that North Carolina is going to be looking at. It might be that we want to look at some of the report and think about some of these action teams in Guilford County. Maybe we want totally different action teams. And so we'll talk about that and focus on that in the December meeting, but just wanted to plant the seed to be thinking about resiliency work in Guilford County, the value statements that our mission and our value statements that we've been working on the last couple months. And now what action teams do we need to accomplish that work? So that's the goal of our meeting coming up. That next meeting is December 1st from 12 to 1. We'll do it virtual again, and it'll be continuing the strategy and action planning with a focus on the action team formation. So, additional announcements from the team or from anyone on the call that they would like to share? Open floor for any announcements, resources that people might want to share, updates, those kinds of things.
This is Leland from the Kellen Foundation. Just want to give us another save the date. Our Seeds of Hope team, which is focusing on youth impacted by the addiction crisis, will be offering a free 2-series training. The first part will happen on December 9th from 12 to 1 online, and we're going to be focusing on the current trends in adolescent substance use, impact on brain and behavior. And then part 2 in January will be regarding evidence-based practices and ways to intervene with these youth. So be on the lookout for the registration link for that.
For me, just a continued reminder for those who work with kids, the Pathways program takes referrals all year for kids impacted by domestic violence. So if you're working with a family, maybe the caregiver or a child age 7 to 11 that would benefit from community with other kids, it's not a therapeutic program per se. It's more like a group mentoring program. So if you have a kid that would benefit from that's experienced domestic violence, please feel free to send them my way, and I'll put my email in the chat.
Hi, I'm Valerie Jones. I'm the System of Care Coordinator at Sandhills. And I just want to let y'all know that at the Guilford Collaborative meeting, which is next Tuesday, the 9th, we will have Dr. Brittany Bate, and she is going to be speaking on understanding and supporting sexual orientation and gender identity development in children. So that's 12:45 to 2 hour and 15 minutes next Tuesday if you want to join.
Any other announcements or any other things that people want to share as resources at this point? Okay, we are right at 1 o'clock. Thank you so much for your hard work, dedication, thought process, thought sharing, all of those different pieces. We will be following up with a summary of our meeting and a link to the recording, and we will see you December 1st. Stay well, and thank you again for all that you do.
Bye, Kelly.
Bye, everyone.